this. The Pope and a Native American walk into a forest. Now, of course, it sounds like the beginning of a joke, and yet there are two true stories here. The Pope that I'm talking about is Pope Francis, and I will share about that in a moment. And the Native American is Robin Wall Kimmerer. Now, her book has gone viral, and some of you may already have read it. More on her later. But first, the Pope. What I'm about to share with you are themes found in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. And this is, it's a call for an urgent response to environmental issues, and it emphasizes the importance of caring for our common home. If you translate Laudato Si into English, it means praise be to you. And it's derived from the poem of prayer, Canticle of Creatures, which was written by St. Francis of Assisi. There's a phrase that echoes like a bell throughout Laudato Si by Sir Pope Francis. Everything, everything is connected. It's a simple sentence, it's almost obvious, and it's a powerful, important, urgent reminder that everything is connected, not just philosophically, but also materially, spiritually, economically, ethically. The air that we breathe is shaped by forests that we, in our lifetimes, may never see. The food on our tables carries the stories of soil, rain, labor, and trade. The treatment of our planet is what binds us across borders, across species, across generations. If everything is connected, which it is, then so is our responsibility. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis offers a vision he calls integral ecology. It's a way of understanding the world that refuses to separate the environmental from the social and the spiritual from the material. It is a vision that resonates deeply with our Unitarian Universalist commitment to the interdependent web of all of existence. But today I want to ground that vision in something practical, and there are known as the 7 goals of integral ecology. I won't go through them all in detail, but I will introduce one very briefly, one by one. It's a framework that invites us not just to reflect, but to live differently. So let us walk very quickly through them, remembering that Pope Francis did not offer us a checklist. He actually called it covenant. So I know that we have great note takers amongst our congregation. So if you are one of those, I would suggest grabbing your pencil and paper now, because I will give you the title of each of the 7 steps, or goals as well as they're known. So the first is this: response to the cry of the earth. And this is what Arlene spoke so beautifully and so powerfully by, both in her reading. Thank you for sharing that reading, Arlene, but also in her reflection. The earth is not silent. It's crying out in rising seas, in burning forests, in vanishing species. And we see it everywhere through the fragility of the ecosystems that are being disrupted. Systems that once upon a time we assumed were stable forever. So to respond is not to just feel concern, but it's actually to listen deeply to these cries and to act. It is to ask, what does love require of us in a time of ecological grief? The second is this: response to the cries of the poor. Now, integral ecology insists that environmental justice and social justice are actually inseparable, because there are those who have contributed to the ecological destruction and, of course, have caused suffering and consequences to those very often who have the least in our world. In this, of course, we do hear the echo of our UU principles of dignity, equity, and compassion. So the question is not only how do we work with the planet, but also who is being affected by our choices, our actions. And as I said, very often it's usually the poorest and most vulnerable amongst us. The third is what Pope Francis calls ecological economics. Now, this one is challenging because it asks us to reconsider the very systems that we live within. What would an economy look like if it measured success not by endless growth, but by well-being, by sustainability, by justice? Imagine every purchase we make, every investment we support is a vote for a certain kind of world. Number 4, the adoption of a sustainable lifestyle. Integral ecology calls us to examine how we live, our consumption, our waste, our habits. And as many of you know, being here on the southern tip of the African continent, my attitude towards food, waste, water, the preciousness even of electricity has been radically shifted in the past 5 years. So we're being asked to examine not from a place of guilt, but actually, Pope Francis argues, from a place of freedom. It's to rediscover the joy of enough. What if simplicity were not a burden, but actually a liberation? The fifth is ecological education. And again, as many of you know, I'm very committed to that in my day job as a teacher, but also working amongst the youth. Change, of course, does not happen without awareness. And education in this sense is not only about giving and exchanging information, it's about shaping hearts and imaginations, teaching ourselves and the next generations not only how the world works, but why it matters. Teaching ourselves and the next generations to care. The sixth is ecological spirituality. Now, this is where integral ecology meets what I like to think of and what actually Pope Francis talks about, which is the language of the soul. To see the earth not as an object, but as a sacred community. To experience awe and gratitude and reverence. And to remember that we are not outside or separate to. That's what Pat McCabe was saying of nature. We are nature. And I like what Rumi says in one of his poems. I am that cat, this stone, everyone. And the seventh is community engagement and participatory action. And this we know as a community, we definitely excel in. We're so committed to it. And so we're reminded that, of course, that we do not do any of this alone. Transformation is not an individual project, it's a collective journey. And change happens in communities, just like this one. And like Desmond Tutu said, one of my favorite quotes of all time, the tidal wave of change is made up of 1,000,000 different ripples. So we're not powerless, and neither are we solitary. So what do we do with all of this? Because, of course, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And, of course, I believe, and if you read Laudato Si or even about integral ecology, you'll see that we're not being asked to do everything. But what we're asked to do is to start somewhere, to choose just one thread in this web of connection and tend to it with care. To make just one change that aligns our lives more closely with our values. To take one step that says, I understand that everything is connected, and I will live as if that is true. So Laudato Si is offering us something very real and very effective. And I don't believe that it's naive optimism, and neither, of course, did Pope Francis. It's actually grounded in hope. A hope that's rooted in relationship with ourselves, with each other, and with everything around us. And a belief that transformation is possible because we are capable of the most important thing and the deepest form of connection, which is love. Now, back to the Native American, Robin Wall Kimmerer. I want to show you this if you are not familiar. I have to say that if I were in a fire in my house and I was told I had to sweep up just one armful of books, this most definitely would be one of them. I think I've read it already 3 times. It's been in the New York Times bestseller list for the past 5 years and remains there still. So if you're going to treat yourself to anything this Earth Month, I would urge you to get your hands on a copy of this, Braiding Sweetgrass. Now, she, if you don't know of her, is a scientist, a mother, and a member of a citizen of the Potawatomi nation. And she offers us not just ideas, but actually a way of seeing. She invites us to ask a simple but very radical question. What if the world is not made up of resources, but of relatives? Many of us were taught, either implicitly or explicitly, that the natural world is something for us to use, that land is property, water is a commodity, and forests are timber. Even the language that we've inherited reflects this relationship. We speak, of course, of natural resources, of harvesting, of management. But Kimmerer gently unsettles this worldview. One of the reasons that I love her so much. She writes of plants and animals not as objects, but as beings, as teachers, as kin. And she reminds us that, as in many indigenous traditions, the earth is not something that we stand on. What did Pat McCabe say? We're holy surface earth walkers. It's something also that we belong to. And that shift from ownership to relationship changes everything. In her book, she speaks about the idea of gift economy. She asks us to notice how the earth gives. Strawberries do not withhold of themselves. Trees don't invoice us for oxygen. The rivers don't demand payment before they flow. The world actually is full of gifts. And in a gift economy, the appropriate response is not transaction, but actually gratitude. And not just gratitude as a feeling, but gratitude as a practice, as a way of living. And Kimra also writes about what she calls the honorable harvest. In other words, this: take only what you need. Ask permission. Use everything that you take and give something back. It's both simple and profound. And here is where Kimra challenges us most deeply. She suggests that the ecological crisis that we're facing is not only a crisis of climate or of consumption, but it's actually a crisis of relationship. It's a forgetting. It's a forgetting how to be in right relationship with the earth, with one another, and even with ourselves. And yet woven through braiding sweetgrass is not despair, but actually hope. Because if the problem is a broken relationship, then by definition, healing is possible. Relationships, as we know in our own lives, can be restored. But of course, restoration requires attention, and it requires listening, and it requires what Kimra calls learning the grammar of animacy. Let me explain that quickly before I close. In English, we're taught that only humans and some animals are alive in a way that deserves personhood. Often we project, of course, personhood onto our pets. And sometimes everything else becomes it. But what happens when we begin to speak of the earth not as it, but as who? Not it is raining, but the rain is visiting. What an amazing shift. Not it is a tree, but she's standing there offering us shade. Now, it may sound small and perhaps to some even poetic, but language, as we know, shapes perception, and perception shapes action. So when we begin to see the earth and everything in it as alive, then, as Kimra argues, our behavior begins to change. So perhaps the invitation today is not do something grand, but actually to begin with something small. Just to step outside our front doors and notice. Perhaps to learn the names of the plants that grow in our gardens or near our homes. To offer a quiet word of thanks before a meal. not as a routine, but rather as a recognition. And to pause before taking anything and ask, even silently, what is needed and what is enough? The truth is that we are already in relationship with the soil beneath us, with the water that sustains us, with the air that moves through us. I love the quote of Mary Oliver, begging for it to fill our lungs each time. So the question is not whether we are connected, but whether we will live as if we are. So as I close, I offer this challenge to us all and to myself. May we learn the grammar of gratitude. May we walk ever more gently. May we take wisely and mindfully. And may we give back to our Mother Earth in whatever ways we can, generously. And may we come once again to know the earth in relationship and to know everything in the world, not as things, but as the community to which we are just a part and to which we belong. And to never forget our interconnectedness. May it be so, and so it is.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.